Welcome to 3DLANES number 72. Today we're touching on Cosworth. And I'm recording this one late because last week was crazy. We had some escalations happening at work, and the weekend I had to, we had a family event for the kids, and we also I had to turn in a bunch of homework for the MBA. So the whole escalation at work delayed me on doing schoolwork, and the family event also delayed me to do schoolwork. So I had to do everything at night, either Saturday or Sunday. So I was not able, I did not have time to record the whole week. But here we are. We're talking about Cosworth today. And if you're not familiar with Cosworth, after this episode, you're going to be familiar with it. It is an interesting story, I think, because it's a shifting or pivot from within the same industry. But if you didn't know, Cosworth is an engineering company that started making engines for Lotus, and we have a bunch of other cars that have used Cosworth throughout the years. But now the end game for Cosworth is more into the luxury space. So yeah, it's an interesting story. So let's begin in 1958. Cosworth was founded in London in October of that year by Mike Costin and Keith Duckworth. So both were former employees of Lotus, and obviously the name, if you haven't caught it yet, that it's from Costin's last name and Duckworth's last name. So the beginning of one, the end of the other one, Cosworth. And Duckworth basically had enough of Lotus, and he said, only 2 months into the job, he was like, I don't like how this place is run, so I'm out. And he joined forces with Costin, but unfortunately, Costin had signed a contract, a long-term contract with Colin Chapman, and he was not able to join Cosworth full time until 1962. So Duckworth and his wife Ursula ran the whole Cosworth enterprise in the early years until Costin was able to get out and get full time into the development of Cosworth. But the initial revenue, interesting enough, came from Lotus. So they left Lotus, but Lotus was their first and biggest customer at the beginning. They started with engines, the Mark II through the Mark 14, and these were sold exclusively to Lotus Formula Junior, and they had some road car applications with these engines. The Formula Junior engines, the Mark III, 4, 11, and 17, attracted non-Lotus revenues because they were so good, and they made Cosworth basically establish the name as a good brand. And this triggered the establishment of Formula B by the SCCA. So what was the original objective of Cosworth? It was they were aiming to design and build superior racing internal combustion engines with engineering precision as their primary driver. Then they wanted to eventually build a complete Cosworth car. I don't think that ever happened, but in its early years, it was a specialized supplier to the British racing community, and they, like we said before, relied almost entirely on the relationship with Lotus for its survival. As of 2024, like mentioned before, also, Cosworth has positioned itself as a true global luxury automotive brand, and they focus on bespoke, high performance internal combustion engines for the ultra luxury automotive sector. Like who? As an example, you have Aston Martin and Gordon Murray. Those are some of the present or current customers of Cosworth. But a brief development timeline that I would like to mention is the early engine development was from 1958 to 1966. They were using Ford Kent block engines for Formula Junior, and the first series production engine, the Mark II, entered production in 1960. The first fully Cosworth designed cylinder head appeared in the SCA engine in 1964, and it was in Formula 2 that won their inaugural race and other races uh, in 1964. A Grand Prix by Jim Clark. That's the most notable one. Jim Clark. He's a very interesting figure in this story because that's another name that you should know. Jim Clark was born in March 4th of 1936, and he is a Scottish uh, racing driver, Formula One racing driver that raced with Team Lotus since I think that all the 60s at least. But he spent his entire F1 career, 72 starts, exclusively. Man, why am I getting stuck? With Team Lotus and under Colin Chapman, the gentleman that were Costin had the contract with, right? So remember, Keith Duckworth left Lotus 2 months into the job, and then Costin stayed with Colin Chapman, and Colin Chapman was the Formula One leader back in the day. So now we move to the follow-on engine, which was the FVA, a four-valve Type A engine that it was produced in 1966. This was an engine produced for Formula 2, and it was developed under the same contract as the DFB, which we're going to touch on later. But he was letting everybody know that Duckworth's designs were good, and this would define the V8 engine that would follow. But the FVA engine dominated Formula 2 until 1971, so produced in 1966. Until 1971, the domination happened. The DFB era, which is from 1967 to 1983. In 1966, Colin Chapman persuaded Ford to fund a new 3.0 liter Formula One engine. They were given £100,000 from Ford, and they were told that they needed a four-cylinder F2 engine as proof of concept, which was the FBA, right? The one that we just talked about. And they followed by a V8 for Formula One. So the result was the DFB, double four valve, a compact 90-degree V8 that act as a structural chassis member. And it was a concept that Chapman championed in this stage of his career. But this engine won the Dutch Grand Prix in 1967, again driven by Jim Clark in the Lotus 49. The DFB went on to win 155 World Championship races, 12 Drivers' Championships, and 10 Constructors' titles. And it is still the most successful F1 engine of all time by race wins. Cosworth's total F1 wins as an engine supplier stands at 176. They are only third to Ferrari and Mercedes. In 1975, the turbocharged DFX variant was introduced in the US for IndyCar, and it won the debut race of Indy 500 where it participated, and he won 10 consecutive Indy 500 events after that. Now we have the road car diversification from 1969 to 1990s, and Cosworth was tightly associated with Ford, and in 1969, the BDA belt-driven Dock 16 valve engine was developed for the Ford Escort. This was used for the FIA Group 2 and Group 4 rally. Later, the Ford Sierra RS Cosworth launched in 1986 with a 2.0-liter turbocharged YB engine. After that, It was built in 5,000 units for homologation. You know, the homologation requirements that we've spoken about before, at least in the Group B um, episode. But after this, the Sierra RS 500 launched in 1987, and this one went to dominate Group A, and it toured basically around the globe, and he won multiple championships between 1987 to 1992. We finally have the Ford Zetec R V8, and this one was launched in 1994. It was produced by Cosworth and funded by Ford, power Michael Schumacher's first Formula One World Championship with Benetton, and it was the last for Power F1 title. We have some diversification and hypercar era after that. But before this, Cosworth changed hands multiple times. In 1980, Keith Duckworth sold his stake to United Engineering. He wanted to retain life presidency and technical role, which he did. In 1988, UEI, acquired by Carlton Communications. Cosworth becomes a poor fit of the whole acquisition. And then in 1990, Vickers PLC acquires Cosworth. Then in 1998, Vickers sold Cosworth to Audi. Audi split the company uh, in Cosworth Technology, which is the engineering manufacturing side, which they retained, but then they went to sell Cosworth Racing and Pi Research to Ford. So two different sides of Cosworth now split up. And then in 2004, Ford sold their Cosworth Racing to Champ Car World Series owners, which were Gerald Forsyth and Kevin Kalkoven, on November 15th of 2004. Ford also sold the Pi Research to Kalkoven and Forsyth, and they were able to reunite the brand as the Cosworth Group later on. But then Audi in 2005 sold their technology side of things to Mahle GmbH, and it was renamed Mahle Powertrain on July 1st, 2005, and that's where we stand. So now we move to the diversification and hypercar era. Since 2006, they have basically focused on engineering consultancy, high performance electronics, and component manufacture outside of motorsport. In 2008, there were a 5.4 million contract by the US Navy to develop heavy fuel engine for the RQ-21A Blackjack, and this is an unmanned aerial vehicle. They also supplied past tense their last premier F1 engines to the Marussia F1 team in 2013. Then they have made the pivot to ultra luxury hypercar engines, and this was accelerated with the Aston Martin. The Valkyrie has a Cosworth engine, a 6.5 liter V12. The Gordon Murray T50 has a Cosworth engine, a 4.0 liter V12, and then the Bugatti Tourbillon has a Cosworth engine, a V16 8.3 liter, which also uses a hybrid system. And finally, the Red Bull RB17 uses a Cosworth 4.5 liter V10, and this one has electric hybrid assist, and it's limited to 50 units. The company currently operates 3 business units: Cosworth Propulsion, which is a high-performance internal combustion engine development and manufacture; Delta Cosworth, which is high-voltage battery development; and Cosworth Electronics, which is a hybrid and EV controlled systems and drivetrains. We could get into the financials, but actually, Cosworth is a private company, so everything that we could say here, a lot of it might be speculation, so I'm not going to get into their financials. So, if we move to product, which again we've been discussing quite a bit uh, now, but Cosworth core product is a bespoke, low volume, high performance internal combustion engine powertrains. Again, like the Valkyrie V12, the Gordon Murray T50 with the V12, the Bugatti with the V16. But beyond the internal combustion engines, the company produces high voltage battery systems, again with Delta Cosworth, electronic control systems, including the performance data recorder PDR, launched on the 2015 Chevy Corvette. They produced engine blocks and cylinder heads to high volume OEMs like Honda, for example. They source engine blocks and heads from their Northampton facility for the second generation NSX. If we move to pricing, Cosworth targets the ultra luxury segment, and these are vehicles priced above $1 million, right? So, no specific price here, but you can assume how expensive everything would be. Place or distribution, they operate from their Northampton, UK headquarters, also facilities in Cunningham and Silverstone. Everything in England except for a facility in Indiana for the IndyCar side of things and other sensor applications. Everything is basically B2B, business to business. Finally, if we move to promotion, they rely heavily on ingredient branding, and their name appears on engine cam covers on vehicles like Aston Martin, the Gordon Murray, or Bugattis. They also leverage the 176 Formula One wins that they have. They across everything that they market or communications that they can distribute. That's what they're gonna leverage. But if we move to five forces, we have the threat of new entrants, and here I'm gonna say the facts, and then we'll see where we stand here. So they're high performance bespoke engine segments, right? Engineering a natural aspirated V12 or V16 capable of reliably sustaining, let's say 100,000, sorry, 11,000 RPM in a road vehicle requires a lot of expertise. I would say decades of uh, knowledge in in metals, simulation, uh, dynamometer, whatever you want to call any other aspect of building a vehicle that you might need. You need a lot of expertise in all those things. But I don't think just anybody could come in and take that away from them, right? All that experience that they have accumulated, it's not superficial. It's not just to say they have it; they actually use it. Yeah, I would say threat of new entrants is very very low. The capital requirements for facilities with a dynamometer have to be expensive, I would assume. Precision machining centers, fatigue testing for the materials that they use, all those costs. The entry cost would be ridiculous. Bargaining power of suppliers. We have Cosworth's V16 and V12 programs require specialized materials including titanium alloys, Inconel, and other casting alloys. They're proprietary to them. This would have a limited supplier base, I would assume. The mills and all that stuff Yeah, there's mills around the world, but the people that might be able to supply exactly what they need might be limited. So bargaining power of suppliers, I would say high, but because they usually have multi-year development contracts and they are pretty stable in supply chain planning, would say I would still keep it at high, but those two aspects might be able to lower it to medium, but I would like to stick to high here. Bargaining power of buyers. Oof, this one, Aston Martin, Gordon Murray, Bugatti, Red Bull. Each program is large when it comes to revenue, but the loss of a single contract would substantially impact Cosworth. So this is the problem of having only a few customers, right? As higher you go in price, the number of customers is gonna diminish. And these clients also have very, very demanding technical specifications. For example, the Red Bull RB17 engine IP is owned by Red Bull, so not by Cosworth. So whatever they encounter there or whatever they discover there, they cannot leverage that for future programs. That belongs to Red Bull strictly. So bargaining power of buyers, I would say also high. Threat of substitutes. Here, I think the biggest threat would be the electrification of the automotive sector. We have the huge example in China, right? China's kicking ass doing that. Uh, Here in the US, not so much. Everything, I think everywhere else, it's kind of like in between. Uh, Commuting wise, I think that has to happen, right? Something cheaper than gas or alternatives to gas have to happen. But when it comes to Cosworth, then they become more of a, well, they already are a bespoke manufacturer. But the customers are going to be very niche. So at that level, I don't think electrification might affect them as much. There are going to be some addition of electrification to whatever they do, which already have. They have some hybrid engines, right? So in that sense, that might work. But at the same time, we have Bugatti, for example, that it's framing that internal combustion engines, it's an element that's very essential to the brand identity. So Bugatti's not going to drop that ball. So anybody that's buying Bugatti, and Bugattis are not cheap, and if Cosworth keeps going and doing business with Bugatti, then they're relatively safe, right? There are other uh, luxury or entry level luxury cars that uh, offer alternatives that are not Cosworth. For example, Porsche, Ferrari, BMW. Those are substitutes, and those are substitutes in adjacent markets, right? Because it's not the same. But Cosworth does not compete in that volume segment. So these cars have higher volumes than what Cosworth is used to doing. So threat of substitutes, I would say medium. It's a very 50-50 situation. They're still in a very niche area of the market, so I don't think that's gonna die anytime soon. But if we move to competitive rivalry, which is people in the same segment, we have people like or companies like Ricardo, which I never heard of before, AVL in Austria, Multimatic in Toronto, Canada, and Mountoon in Brentwood, UK. But rivalry is primarily based on the technical capability, lead time, and brand equity. So it's not so much price, but Cosworth's differentiated position is its combination of active F1 heritage, the current hypercar program roster. I think that's the biggest advantage that they have, and the vertical integration of design to manufacture capability. Just to give you an idea of the stuff that they had as of 2025, This was what they were cooking, right? Valkyrie, the T50 with Gordon Murray, the Bugatti Tourbillon, the Red Bull RB17, and the Bizzarini, which is a revived brand, and they announced a partnership in 2024. That is what Cosworth has. That is what Cosworth is. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please let me know. I appreciate your time. I will see you next time.